West Hill United is a progressive spiritual community where how you live is more important than what you believe. West Hill United is a people, a place, an idea. We are a community living out of a progressive faith, striving to make a positive difference in our own lives, the lives of others, and the world. Join us Sundays at 10:30 a.m. or connect with us at any time.
The first reading is from an interview with Mutual Aid Disaster Relief. Mutual Aid Disaster Relief is an organization that has emerged to support communities when a disaster strikes, such as a hurricane or earthquake. They are different from most relief organizations in that they focus their solutions on what are asked for by the people experiencing the disaster. They try to offer solidarity rather than charity. They work by trying to connect people who want to help to those who need help. It is very much people helping people. At best, it's people come looking for help and leave as friends. While mutual aid disaster relief focuses on the people in need right now, they also believe that with the looming climate disaster, that mutual aid, people helping people on an informal level, might be necessary for survival. From the interview. There are enough spare rooms and empty houses for everybody who is homeless. There is enough food produced to feed anybody and everybody who is hungry. But many institutions would rather throw it away than share it. What we see time and time again is that disasters magnify already existing inequalities, injustices, and vulnerabilities that existed prior to the disaster. In order to face the resource depletion and other climate change realities that are just around the corner, we need to be experimenting now with the alternative ways of relating to each other that are based on humanity and generosity rather than self-interest and greed. It is imperative for our collective survival. Offered as wisdom for the journey. May we walk.
May we walk in its light.
The next reading is a poem by Joshua Edward. Joshua Edward's poem, The Lamp of Mutual Aid, lifts up the joys but also the pitfalls of mutual aid. There is something beautiful and world-changing when we share together in need, but it is much too easy to fall into our old routines which affirm the status quo. The poem insists that we do not gather to die, but gather to live and improve the web of life. The lamp of mutual aid. Many nights, while walking home after work from downtown to an apartment below a market, I think of Alfred Espinas. We do not get together to die, but to live and improve life. Sudden changes of weather and contagious diseases nearly broke the spirits of many friends that winter. But charmingly, we made habits of dancing and sharing meals in our cramped rooms. Our landlords were thieves, and our bosses were pessimists, yet we dreamed of a new face of civilization, one of kindness and goodwill. We need communes, Oscar exclaimed. Sylvia argued, but islands are corpses. Let's think instead of syndicates. Mondays, we'd return to dirty dishes, copy machines, and dull knives, and we spent the next 3 centuries doing what we were paid to do. Offered as wisdom for the journey. May we walk
in its light.
When we look at the enormity of the problems we face as a people, as a planet, I really appreciate how much West Hill United cares and wants to be part of the solution to these problems. It makes me proud to serve here. But when we look at the enormity of the problems we face as a people and as a planet, it's easy to be overwhelmed. Of course, the most obvious is the looming environmental crisis. But that's not the only thing. We're going through a historic medical crisis. Poverty and hunger thrive amidst record-setting opulence. And there are dozens of wars dotting the globe. It all seems so intractable, so impossible. And it's appropriate to be thankful for what we have, but we are always called to do something when we're surrounded by such immense suffering. And all too often it seems that what we're allowed to do is to vote and sign petitions and lobby politicians. And we should continue to do those things, even though so often it seems that they don't really have the will or the ability to make the necessary difficult changes in order to have a sustainable and loving world. And this kind of way of being has seeped into our charitable organizations as well. If you do any research on international aid or talk to folks who have worked in the industry, you'll hear how people being aided are not receiving what they want or need. There's even a term for this. They call it the nonprofit industrial complex. It seems to exist for the sake of its own interests, for the interests of the nonprofit, rather than for the interests of the people who are actually in need. And if you ever talk to a person living in poverty or a single mother and encourage them to access services, they will often have an insightful critique on the inadequacy of any of these services that are offered. And they're not being lazy or ungrateful. They're highlighting how so often our charity industry isn't listening to the needs of those they're supposed to serve. What these folks are looking for is solidarity, not charity. And we've constructed a world with a restrictive path to our entanglement that's rife with a hierarchy of help. We've created experts, denying that the true expert is the one who is actually in need. And all this hinders our ability to foster connection. The only way we're allowed to help someone is through an intermediary, or even further away by donating. And again, give generously. But we've got to have something more to do than just cut a check. The web of life thrives with the actual connection of its inhabitants, not filtered through impersonal agencies. And I can give you an example of how this kind of system has hindered connection. When I was a minister in Stratford, our pastoral care team was trying to organize a way to get some of the people to church who are having trouble getting there, mostly elderly people, and just by offering them rides. But we were trying to follow United Church policy and, in reality, best practices of what we're told to be. And we said that everyone there, they'd be vulnerable people, and they'd have to get criminal record checks. And then we'd have to make sure that they were able to take care of these people. And in the end, that just created a barrier to those who wanted help. And finally, Norm, this gentle, elderly man who was on the pastoral care team, asked, "Can't I just drive my friend to church?" Norm touched on something deep and powerful there. Can't I just drive my friend to church? And the answer was yes, but don't tell the church about it. And we never did get rides for people. And what Norm's trenchant question illuminated was that in trying to keep people safe and do the right thing, our intentions were good. But we were inhibiting connection. We were inhibiting friendship. We are breaking, or at least straining, the entanglement in the web of life which keeps us alive. We were offering charity, not solidarity. We didn't identify a person in need and reach out to help them. Instead, we tried to fit our relationships into our charitable models. And that just inhibits relationship. And this isn't being grounded in life. It's being a slave to the status quo. We see someone in need, and we are called to help. We're called to ease their suffering. Because as we heard in the poem, Alfred Espina said, "We do not get together to die, but to live and to improve life." We get together, we gather here in this space and on Zoom, not just to die, but to live and improve life. We are grounded in life, and we gather to improve life. And we want to do something more than just check boxes in a bureaucratic form. Sometimes we just want to drive our friend to church. And that's what we're trying to get at with this concept of mutual aid. And you could hear how the poem by Joshua Edwards captured some of the joy and challenges of what it means to gather and to live and improve life. In the face of disaster, we made habits of dancing and sharing meals in cramped rooms, and we dreamed of a new civilization, one of kindness and goodwill. "We need communes," Oscar exclaimed. But Sylvia argued, "Islands are corpses. Let's think instead of syndicates." They gathered and improved life. They thrived in solidarity. They weren't looking for charity, they were looking for connection. But we also hear Edwards capture the enormity of what's facing us when he ends the poem by saying, "And on Monday, we'd return to dirty dishes, copy machines, and dull knives. And we spent the next 3 centuries doing what we were paid to do." He's saying that some of our systems, some of the way we live, are actually inhibiting life. So much of our life is spent trying to survive and pay rent. And then we outsource our compassion to the nonprofit industrial complex. And this breaks our connection and our potential for entanglement. Remember, mutual aid is what we're talking about. Mutual aid is when everyday people get together to meet each other's needs. Because so often the systems that we have are not meeting the needs they're supposed to. And mutual aid says we can gather and meet these needs together right now without having to pressure power structures to do the right thing, without having to write a letter to our MPP or our MP. Mutual aid is really just people helping people. It's a different way of being community. It's solidarity, not charity. And we heard how mutual aid thrives in a disaster. And the quote we heard today from Mutual Aid Disaster Recovery, which is an organization that responds to disaster offering mutual aid, and they don't try to come and take over the situation and save the people. They arrive to offer aid to those in need who know what they need. They'll tell us that regardless of how locally rooted a response effort may be, there's always more work to be done than there are hands to do it. And we don't come empty-handed. We bring supplies or medical aid or something to offer to begin the dialogue that can break the ice and open the door to exploring together how to meet whatever needs to have arisen. We ask, we listen, and we respond with whatever resources and networks we have access to, being honest about our capacity, and as much as possible trying to meet whatever they need immediately without any forms or red tape or other hoops to jump through. And it's not like mutual aid is a brand new concept. There's a long history of barn raising in many communities across Canada, and it's gone on for centuries before that. A farmhouse burned down in the 50s, people from the surrounding area would get together and build a new one. And they would just get together and help build them a house again. They wouldn't ask for permission or make anybody fill out any forms. They would help them rebuild their home. And so you can, and it happens more likely in a disaster. This kind of behavior is promoted in a disaster where survivors tend to default back to meaningful relationships based on mutual aid. And we've seen this during this COVID pandemic, which is really a disaster. There's been a rise of community fridges across the world. And community fridges are volunteer-driven community initiative with a network of fridges and pantries that offer free food to combat food insecurity. Necessities like fresh produce, whole meals even, pantry goods, personal care items can be accessed by anyone at any time of day, no questions asked, without enrolling in a program, and free from the stigma associated with food insecurity. Community members contribute and volunteer to keep fridges running, clean and organized, and make sure that they have food in them. And community fridges exist around the world, holding up the idea of take what you need, leave what you can. They do not police who is able to access food, how much of it, or how often. There are no forms or conditions. You don't have to have an address like so many food banks require. If you are in need, you are welcome. It is solidarity, not charity. So you see, in community fridges, we can see some hope coming out of this disastrous pandemic. We can see love coming out of the pandemic. And so you can see how mutual aid might be able to offer alternatives to our current systems. Mutual aid builds connections that our current system may block. Just like we saw in that pastoral care meeting in Stratford. Mutual aid says that having criminal record checks is not as important as giving my friend a ride to church. Mutual aid opens us up to a healthier web of life. It's grounded in life, guided by love, and growing in wisdom. In disaster relief, some people come from far away to assist with their efforts. They come as strangers, but they leave as friends, with meaningful relationships that will last a lifetime. Mutual aid is grounded in life by meeting the needs of those who are suffering, by offering a helping hand, not a form to fill out. It honors the web of life and our inherent entanglement. We gather to improve life, not to just wait for death. And mutual aid is growing in wisdom. It centers the wisdom of the lived experience by insisting that the true experts are those most affected and those most in need. People who are suffering know what they need. And they are the experts we must listen to if we're truly going to grow in wisdom. And mutual aid is guided by love. It is seeing needs and meeting them without barriers, without judgment. Helping the person who is most in need, guided by love. What that's telling us is that a new world is possible. The future is not preordained. Inevitability is a myth. We can have the future we desire. We can have a future for our children and our grandchildren. We can have a world where everyone's fed, where everyone has a safe place to live. We can live in a world that is marked by love and compassion. We can have the kind of love that flourishes in a disaster all the time. People helping people. After the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, Dorothy Day said, "While the crisis lasted, people loved one another." Let's make that love last. Let's stretch out these temporary autonomous zones where people are able to share goods and services freely, where we reimagine new social relationships outside the dictates of the market, where we work for something real and build a new world together. Peace. Babette.
Thank you, Cindy. We're going to close the service today with the song completely in alignment with your theme, Cindy, More of the Ways of Love. Please stand if comfortable.
I'd like to thank Scott Kearns, Babette Oliveira, Vilma Ramcharan, there she is, Glenn Cockwell, Rangbin Gu, Sunil Hayat, and Piyush Abahadye, and our wonderful welcoming team who sets up and makes coffee and offers cookies. For all of you for making this happen, I'd like to thank all of you for gathering here and for all of you for gathering on Zoom. We're going to have a breakout group for a few minutes afterwards, and I got a couple of questions if you want, if you can think of examples of mutual aid. And do you really believe that mutual aid can help build a better world, or am I just talking through my hat? And this week, I hope you look for mutual aid. You'll find out a bit more about it, but also look for areas in which you might participate in mutual aid, but also that West Hill United might participate in mutual aid. How we might help others, how we might give somebody a ride to church, how you might just feed somebody who needs a meal. And so go into the world steeped in compassion, open to novelty, filled with love, working for justice, caring for your neighbor, remembering that your neighbor is the one who is most in need. And so go grounded in life, guided by love, and growing in wisdom. Peace, folks.
Become a sustaining champion of West Hill United's work by committing to an automatic monthly donation. Learn more or donate now through Canada Helps.